The rain fell heavily that night, with thunder echoing across the Charleston sky. As Madison, exhausted after a grueling 14-hour hospital shift, finally made her way home. All she expected was a hot bath and the comfort of a peaceful home. But, when she opened the door, what greeted her was a letter from the bank about a nearly drained account, a statement of luxury trips to Miami and New York, and photos of a couple in love, Ryan and an unfamiliar woman, laughing and posing in front of a yacht. For a moment, Madison's world stopped. Her heart raced as she reread the documents, her hands trembling. Every fragment of trust she had in Ryan began to shatter in that instant. But the worst was yet to come. She would soon discover that everything she had built with so much sacrifice had been used to fund another woman's lavish lifestyle. A clap of thunder made Madison drop the papers to the floor, and as she knelt amidst the chaos, she realized her life would never be the same again. Madison Clark had always been a resilient woman. At 32, her life seemed to be a carefully crafted balance between work and her dream of financial stability. The daughter of humble farmers in Georgia, Madison had learned early on that the only way to escape the limitations of her childhood was through relentless effort. At 18, she left her small hometown to study nursing in Charleston, South Carolina. Years later, with a degree in hand and a steady job at the regional hospital, she thought she had secured her future. Her marriage to Ryan, a charismatic real estate agent, appeared to be the final piece of her life's puzzle. Ryan was her opposite in many ways, outgoing, charming, and ever optimistic. Madison, on the other hand, was methodical and practical, someone who planned every step with care. They seemed to complement each other, or so she believed. The routine was exhausting, but Madison had a clear goal: save enough to buy a comfortable home, pay off the last of her student loans, and maybe start thinking about children. The couple shared a joint account, which Madison mostly funded through her extra shifts at the hospital. While she endured sleepless nights caring for critically ill patients, Ryan claimed to be building connections for big real estate deals. She trusted him completely. But everything began to unravel on an ordinary November evening. It was nearly 11 p.m. when Madison pulled into the driveway of the modest house she shared with Ryan. Fatigue weighed heavily on her, but a warm relief bloomed in her chest whenever she saw the living room light on, a sign that he was home. However, when she walked in, something felt off. There was no sound of the TV, no smell of dinner warming in the kitchen. Instead, the house was eerily quiet, illuminated only by the dim glow of a table lamp. A stack of mail sat on the kitchen table and among water and electric bills. A bank envelope caught her eye. It bore both her and Ryan's names. It looked like a simple statement, but when she opened it, her body froze. The joint account was nearly empty. There was a long list of withdrawals and payments, luxury hotels in Miami, jewelry purchases in New York, dinners at restaurants Madison could only dream of visiting. Confused, she sifted through the papers, but it was the second envelope, smaller and unassuming, that unraveled the truth. Inside were photos. Ryan, smiling, had his arm around a blonde woman on a yacht, both dressed in white. The woman wore a dazzling smile, holding a champagne glass. Madison felt a sharp pain in her stomach. The dates on the transactions and the photos matched perfectly with the days Ryan had claimed to be at work conferences. Her heart felt like a heavy stone plummeting in free fall. For a moment she couldn't think. The tears came, silent but intense. She sat on the kitchen floor clutching the photos and bank statements as if they could somehow explain the inexplicable. It was as if all the effort, all the sacrifices she had made over the past few years had been thrown away, used to fund a life of luxury she wasn't even a part of. The sound of the front door opening made Madison spring to her feet. It was Ryan. He walked in, jacket slung over his shoulder, humming softly, but froze when he saw the expression on Madison's face. His eyes fell on the envelope and photos scattered across the table. For a brief moment his confident facade faltered, but he quickly tried to regain his composure. "Madison, I can explain," he began, but she cut him off, her voice hoarse, with emotion. "Explain what, Ryan? That while I was working night after night to save, you were on yachts with another woman? That you used everything we had for this? Tell me how you could do this to me." Ryan tried to step closer, but Madison took a step back, raising her hands as if he were a threat. I trusted you, Ryan. I gave my life to you. He shook his head, searching for words, but the silence that followed was deafening. There was no justification, no excuse that could mend what was broken. That night, Madison felt her world collapse around her. The woman who had always believed in sacrifice and love as the pillars of life now faced the harsh reality that everything she had built with Ryan was a lie. The man she loved had been the architect of her downfall, and she was left alone to pick up the pieces. The next morning, Madison woke up as if trapped in a nightmare with no end. The events of the previous night echoed in her mind, cutting into her soul like shards of glass. Ryan hadn't slept at home. He had tried to justify his actions, but she had thrown him out, unable to even look at the man who had turned her life into a lie. Now, the house was silent, and the emptiness around her seemed to scream everything she had lost. Madison spent hours sitting on the couch, staring at the bank statements, the scattered papers on the table, the photos of the mistress smiling in lavish settings. The humiliation was overwhelming. She knew she needed to act, but she felt utterly drained. All she wanted was to disappear. When the phone rang, she nearly didn't answer, but the hospital's number flashing on the screen pulled her back to reality. It was Sharon, the head nurse. Madison, you're late. Are you okay? Sharon's voice, firm but concerned, echoed through the line. Madison opened her mouth to respond, but her voice caught. Sharon pressed on. Are you all right, dear? Should I move you to the afternoon shift today? No, I'm coming, Madison managed to say, though she could barely summon the strength to stand. The drive to the hospital was a blur. The small town of Charleston, with its tree-lined streets and colonial architecture, which had always felt welcoming, now seemed oppressive. She knew she had to keep up appearances, at least until she figured out what to do next. At the hospital, the shift started like any other. She forced a smile as she attended to patients, but her mind was elsewhere. Every time she glanced at the clock, she was reminded of the countless hours she had worked there, sacrificing weekends, holidays, and even birthdays, while Ryan lived a double life with another woman. Her co-workers noticed her apathy, but no one said anything yet. Mid-morning, as Madison organized charts at the reception desk, two nurses nearby began whispering. They didn't realize Madison could hear them, but the tone of their voices made her stomach turn. Did you see what Ava posted on Instagram yesterday? She and Ryan at some fancy restaurant in Miami. They look like such a beautiful couple, don't they? Yeah, but isn't Ryan married? I heard he's getting a divorce. Maybe they've been together for a while now. The words hit Madison like a hammer to the head. Ava. Now she knew the name of the woman who had stolen her husband and apparently her dignity. Ryan's mistress wasn't someone lurking in the shadows. She was flaunting everything publicly. Worst of all, people were already talking about it. Madison tried to block out the conversation and focus on her work, but the humiliation kept chasing her. At lunch, while she sat in the break room, her phone buzzed with a notification. Reluctantly, she unlocked the screen and saw a message from her best friend, Emily. Emily. Maddie, did you see this? Call me when you can. Immediately after, a link to a social media post appeared. Madison's finger hovered over it, but curiosity won out. The link opened directly to Ava's profile, where a recent photo had been posted. Ryan and Ava at a beachfront hotel, with the caption, "Living the life we deserve." It felt like all the air had been sucked out of Madison's lungs. The post already had hundreds of likes and comments. Some people wished the new couple happiness, while others asked curious questions about Ryan's divorce. Her eyes burned with unshed tears, but she couldn't cry there. Hands trembling, she shoved her phone back into her pocket and left the break room, ignoring the curious glances beginning to gather around her. When Madison got home, she found Ryan waiting at the door. He looked different, not remorseful, but defensive, like someone preparing for a confrontation. "You've been ignoring me all day," he began, but Madison cut him off. I don't want to hear your excuses, Ryan. I want to know how you had the nerve to use every penny we saved together to fund a luxury life with her. Her voice shook, but she held her ground. Ryan sighed, running a hand through his hair. I made mistakes, Maddie. But the truth is, we both knew this marriage was sinking. You were always at work, never had time for me. I felt alone. Madison laughed bitterly, though tears streamed down her face. You felt alone? While I was working 14-hour days to secure our future? You cheated on me because I was busy trying to build something for us? Ryan's voice rose in frustration. It's not that simple. You don't understand what I was going through. No, Ryan. What I don't understand is how you could look me in the eyes all this time while planning to destroy me, she replied, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. He tried to step closer again, but Madison raised a hand to stop him. I want you out of my house. Pack your things and leave. I don't want to hear anything else. Ryan hesitated, but when he saw the determination in Madison's eyes, he realized there was no room for negotiation. Without another word, he left, leaving her alone once more. Madison spent the night staring at the ceiling, searching for a thread of hope amid the chaos. Her life savings were gone, her reputation was being dragged through the mud, and the man she had loved had betrayed her in every possible way. She didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain. She wouldn't let Ryan and Ava walk away unscathed. That night, as the silence of the house blended with the distant sound of cars on the street, Madison realized that the weight of Ryan's betrayal was heavier than she had imagined. It wasn't just about him using their savings and lying about every detail of their lives. It was the public humiliation. The sense that the whole town knew what was happening before she did, and now her shame was being put on display as a spectacle for everyone to see. Still, Madison decided she wouldn't remain paralyzed. She needed answers, needed to understand how deep Ryan's lies went. Determined, she opened her laptop and began digging through their accounts, bank records, Ryan's social media, and of course Ava's profile. It felt like digging in wet soil. The deeper she went, the heavier it got. Every new discovery was another stab in her heart. She found out that Ryan hadn't just started his relationship with Ava recently. The bank transactions Madison analyzed showed that he had been funding this parallel life for at least 2 years. Airline tickets to destinations like Las Vegas, Los Angeles, and even Aruba were there, all paid for with the joint account card she believed was being used to build their future. The deception was so calculated it made Madison feel sick. What hurt even more was realizing she was completely alone in this. Ryan had his friends, all seemingly aware of his new life and supporting his relationship with Ava. But Madison, she had no one to lean on. Her parents were too old and lived far away, and her best friend Emily was her only confidant. Even so, Emily couldn't fully grasp the depth of what Madison was going through. When Emily visited the next afternoon, she found Madison sitting on the living room floor, surrounded by papers, photos, and bank statements. Emily, who had always been the pillar of strength in Madison's life, was shocked at the devastation in her friend. My God, Maddie, you can't keep doing this, Emily said, kneeling beside her. You need to fight back. Fight back how, Emily? Madison asked, her voice trembling. He destroyed everything. He spent everything we had, humiliated me publicly, and now he's living like nothing happened. How do I fight that? Emily took Madison's hands, looking her straight in the eyes. You can't let him get away with this, not after everything. You worked hard for everything you had and he threw it away like it meant nothing. This can't end here. That night, Madison began planning her next steps. She knew she needed to confront Ryan again, but this time she would do it with every tool at her disposal. The next day she called a divorce attorney recommended by Emily. The law firm was located in downtown Charleston, in an imposing red brick building. The atmosphere inside felt cold but efficient. Her attorney, Mark, was straightforward and professional. After hearing her story, he didn't mince words. Madison, based on what you're telling me, we can file to protect what's left of your marital assets. But I have to be honest. Recovering the money he spent will be difficult. Still, we can fight for compensation in the divorce. I don't just want the divorce, Mark, Madison said, her voice firm despite the lump in her throat. I want him to feel the weight of what he did. He destroyed my life and used my hard work to fund another woman. He needs to pay for that. Mark nodded, understanding her pain and determination. We'll do everything we can to ensure he faces the legal and financial consequences of his actions. The days that followed were even harder. With every new revelation, Madison felt as if she were sinking deeper and deeper. Ryan hadn't just lied about the money. He had lied about almost everything. He claimed he was in business meetings, but in reality, he was staying in luxury hotels with Ava. He spoke of struggles at work, but the real reason for his difficulties was the absurd extravagance he indulged in to impress his mistress. Madison began to see that the relationship she had romanticized for so long was full of red flags she had chosen to ignore. The times he seemed distant, the moments when she felt he was hiding something, the nights he came home late with flimsy excuses. She had always attributed it to work stress, but now she knew it was so much more. The final straw came when Madison discovered that Ryan had taken out a second mortgage on their home, the same home she was killing herself to pay off. He had used the money to buy extravagant gifts for Ava, including a diamond necklace Madison recognized from a photo on Ava's Instagram. It was as if he had meticulously planned every step to ensure Madison had no way out. When she confronted Ryan one last time before officially filing for divorce, they met at a cafe in town. He looked relaxed, almost indifferent. When she walked in, he glanced up at her with a faint smile as if trying to downplay the situation. Madison, he began, but she cut him off immediately. Don't say anything, Ryan. I didn't come here to hear your excuses. I came to tell you that you won't get away with this. He sighed, leaning forward in his chair. Maddie, I didn't do this to hurt you. I needed something different, something that made me feel alive. Madison laughed, but it wasn't a joyful laugh. It was bitter, filled with pain. Feel alive? You destroyed the life of someone who loved you, who believed in you, to feed your vanity. That's not feeling alive, Ryan. That's being rotten to the core. He didn't respond. Instead, he looked away, as if avoiding the weight of her words. But Madison knew he didn't feel guilt, only inconvenience. As she left the cafe, she promised herself she would fight with everything she had. Ryan had taken so much from her money, her trust, even her dignity. But he wouldn't take anything else. Not her strength, not her future. The day Madison signed the paperwork to begin the divorce felt like the start of an entirely new and brutal chapter in her life. Still, she knew she couldn't rebuild herself without first facing all the pain she carried. It was like clearing the ashes of a house consumed by fire. Painful, slow, but absolutely necessary. Madison began organizing what little finances she had left. Her divorce attorney, Mark, had made it clear that the process would be long and potentially draining. While Ryan had burned through most of their savings, Madison still had her modest hospital retirement fund and an emergency account he hadn't touched. She knew she'd have to save every penny going forward. Any luxury, even an expensive coffee or a meal out, was off the table. The routine at the hospital, which had once felt merely exhausting, now felt almost unbearable. Each shift dragged on longer than the last, and the pitying or curious glances from her co-workers silently tortured her. Many of them knew about the betrayal. Social media had made sure the story spread, especially after Ava kept posting pictures with Ryan as if they were living a fairy tale. Did you see this? One of the nurses whispered near the desk on a particularly busy day. They're in New York now. Looks like he rented a loft in Brooklyn. Madison pretended not to hear, but every comment was like a knife cutting, deeper into her self-esteem. She had dedicated her life to hard work, sacrifice, and love, and yet there was Ryan, being rewarded for his betrayal with a life of luxury alongside Ava. Despite all the humiliation, Madison resolved that she wouldn't let Ryan's choices define her. One night after a long shift, she sat on the couch and began writing a list. It was something her mother used to tell her when things felt impossible. Write down what you need to do, one step at a time. That way, you won't get lost in the chaos. Madison wrote down 3 goals. Recover as much of her finances as possible. Rebuild her self-esteem and find a new purpose. Ensure Ryan faced legal consequences for his actions. The list seemed simple on paper, but Madison knew that each of those steps would be a monumental challenge. The next day, Madison tackled the first item on her list. She scheduled a meeting with a financial advisor recommended by Mark. Sitting in the small office in downtown Charleston, she was greeted by Christine, a woman in her 40s with a kind demeanor and a focused gaze. "Madison, I've reviewed the documents you sent over," Christine began, gesturing to the bank statements and records Madison had brought. "The situation is tough, but not impossible. You still have your emergency fund and your retirement account. We can also attempt to contest the mortgage in court, though that will take time. My advice is to focus on cutting expenses and, if possible, consider taking on a temporary second job." The thought of working even more than she already did felt crushing, but Madison nodded. She knew she didn't have a choice. It was either that or sink further into the debt Ryan had left behind. A few days later, Madison started working at a local cafe during her time off from the hospital. It was a simple job, serving coffee and cleaning tables, but it provided some extra income. However, the humiliation seemed to follow her even there. One day, as she served a customer, a familiar voice called her name. "Madison, is that you?" Turning, she saw Claire, an old classmate, accompanied by 2 friends. Claire looked at her with a mix of surprise and pity, something Madison had grown accustomed to. "I didn't know you worked here," Claire continued, flashing a fake smile. "I heard about you and Ryan. I'm so sorry." Madison swallowed hard, forcing a polite smile. "Thank you. Can I take your order?" Claire tilted her head as if scrutinizing every detail of Madison's tired face. "Of course, but Maddie, if you need anything, let me know, okay? I heard things are complicated for you." Though Claire's words sounded kind, they were laced with judgment. After they left, Madison went to the restroom and stared at herself in the mirror. Tears began to spill, but she wiped them away quickly. She couldn't afford to cry there. While struggling to survive financially, Madison began working on the second item on her list, rebuilding her self-esteem. She knew the emotional weight of Ryan's betrayal was still crushing her, and if she didn't address it, she would never move forward. After much hesitation, she scheduled a session with a therapist, Dr. Helen Bennett. During the first session, Madison was nervous and guarded. Sitting across from someone and exposing all her vulnerabilities felt unbearable. But as the conversation unfolded, she began to realize she was carrying a burden that went far beyond Ryan. "Madison, from what you've shared, your dedication to work and financial security has always been a way to maintain control," Dr. Bennett said, adjusting her glasses. "But now you need to understand that not everything is within your control. What Ryan did doesn't define who you are, but you're letting it dictate your identity. Let's work on that." Those words stayed with Madison for days. She realized Ryan had stolen more than money. He had taken her sense of self-worth, her identity. The journey to rebuild that would be long, but Madison knew it was essential. Madison also started reconnecting with small things that brought her joy. She resumed running in the park, something she had always loved but had abandoned due to overwork. She also began painting again, a hobby she had enjoyed as a teenager, but left behind when she started nursing school. Slowly, she began to feel small glimpses of light amid the darkness. Yet the challenges kept coming. One afternoon, Madison received a call from Mark. "Madison, I need you to come to the office. Ryan's hired an aggressive attorney and they're trying to claim that the expenses he incurred were necessary for the well-being of the marriage." Madison felt her blood boil. "Well-being of the marriage? He spent our savings on another woman." "I know," Mark replied calmly. But they're trying to twist the narrative. We need more evidence to prove financial misconduct. Do you have anything beyond the bank? Statements that shows misuse of funds? Madison thought for a moment, her mind racing through months of memories. Then she remembered something. An email Ryan had sent months earlier asking her to sign a bank authorization. He had claimed it was for an investment, but Madison had never seen any returns. I have something, she said, her voice steady. And I'm going to fight with everything I've got. The day of the final confrontation arrived like an inevitable storm. After weeks of gathering documents, reviewing evidence, and delving deep into the spiral of lies Ryan had constructed, Madison knew she couldn't delay any longer. She was tired, emotionally drained, but something inside her, a flame that had stayed lit even amid the chaos, pushed her forward. It was time to face Ryan, dismantle his lies, and reclaim the life he had tried to destroy. On the morning of the trial, Charleston's courthouse was packed. The creak of old wooden benches filled the air as people settled in, creating a palpable tension in the room. Madison sat beside her lawyer, Mark, wearing a simple black dress that reflected her seriousness and resolve. She appeared calm, but inside her heart was pounding like a drum. Across the room, Ryan sat with his attorney, a well-dressed and smug-looking man. Ava was seated in the gallery, looking perfectly at ease in her role as the new partner. When Ryan glanced at Madison, he gave her a faint, condescending smile, as if he still believed he had control. Madison ignored him, focusing instead on the notes Mark had prepared for the case. She wouldn't let him shake her, not anymore. Ryan's lawyer began with cold, calculated arguments. He tried to claim that Ryan's extravagant expenses, on trips, restaurants, and gifts, were part of an effort to save the marriage. He even suggested that Madison's long hours at work had emotionally neglected Ryan, driving him to seek financial escapism. The words made Madison's blood boil, but she held her composure. This was their game, twisting the truth, making her look like the one at fault. When Mark rose to respond, his tone was sharp and unwavering. Emotional neglect? Your Honor, I'd like to present documented evidence that these so-called expenses to save the marriage were in fact used to sustain an ongoing extramarital relationship between Ryan Clark and his mistress, Ava Carter. Mark placed copies of bank statements, hotel reservation records, and even Ava's social media posts on the table, dating back 2 years, exactly when Ryan's reckless spending had begun. The courtroom fell silent. Ryan's face tightened, and Ava, who had maintained an air of confidence, now looked visibly uncomfortable. Furthermore, Mark continued, I would like to call Madison Clark to the stand to explain how these expenditures impacted not only her finances, but also her life. When Madison was called to testify, she took a deep breath before standing. As she walked to the front of the courtroom, she could feel every eye in the room on her. Ryan's gaze was defiant. Ava's was defensive, but the rest of the room seemed supportive, eager to hear her side. Seated on the witness stand, Madison looked directly at the judge and began to speak. I've worked as a nurse for 10 years. I've always taken extra shifts to ensure that Ryan and I could have a stable future. We had a joint account where we put all our savings. I believed that money would be used to buy a home, maybe start a family. I never imagined it would be used to fund a life of luxury with another woman. She paused, feeling the weight of her words. The room was utterly silent. While I was at the hospital working endless nights, Ryan was staying in luxury hotels, buying expensive gifts for Ava, and lying to me. He didn't just betray my trust, he destroyed everything we built together. And now he's trying to justify it, blaming me, claiming I neglected him. Madison turned to face Ryan directly. Her voice shook, but it wasn't from weakness, it was from raw emotion. Ryan, I never neglected you. I sacrificed for us. But you chose to be selfish. You chose to lie, to cheat, and to use my hard work to feed your vanity. And I want you to know that today, I'm not here to ask for anything. I'm here to reclaim what's mine, my dignity, my peace, and what little remains of the life you tried to destroy. When Madison finished, Ryan looked visibly uncomfortable, but he said nothing. For the first time, it seemed he understood that he had lost control of the narrative. Ava, on the other hand, couldn't hide her anger at being publicly exposed, as the other woman. After hours of testimony and arguments, the judge delivered the ruling. He sided with Madison on nearly every point. Ryan was ordered to sell the luxury loft he had rented with Ava in New York, return part of the savings he had spent, and pay significant damages for the financial and emotional harm he had caused. Ava, while not directly part of the case, left, the courtroom exposed and humiliated, knowing her relationship with Ryan was now seen as a sham by everyone. Ryan tried to argue, but the judge was firm. "Mr. Clark, your actions demonstrate a complete lack of regard for the responsibilities of marriage. The evidence presented clearly shows that you acted deliberately to harm your wife. There is no justification for that." As Madison left the courtroom, she felt a sense of closure, though she knew the road ahead would still be long. Ryan had taken much from her, but he hadn't taken everything. Now, she could finally start to rebuild her life on her own terms. The court's decision felt like a weight lifted from Madison's shoulders. It wouldn't solve everything, but it was a start, a first step toward reclaiming her life. As she walked out of the courthouse, the cool breeze hit her face. For the first time in months, she felt light, as though she could finally breathe again. Emily was waiting outside and pulled her into a tight hug the moment she appeared. "You did it, Maddie. You won." Madison smiled, her eyes brimming with tears. But this time, they weren't tears of sadness. They were of relief, gratitude, and strength. She knew the road ahead was still long, but in that moment, she finally felt she had control of her life again. Across the street, Ryan and Ava were arguing. He looked furious. She stood with her arms crossed, shaking her head in disapproval. Madison watched for a moment before turning away. They didn't matter anymore. She knew, no matter what happened, she would never let anyone make her feel so small again. The weeks following the trial were a mix of relief and pain for Madison. While the court's decision had been a major victory, the reality of rebuilding her life still felt overwhelming. The public humiliation and emotional toll lingered, but for the first time, she felt like she was on a path toward peace. On the first night the judge's ruling was enforced, Madison received a transfer of some of the savings Ryan had stolen. It wasn't enough to undo the damage, but it was a foundation to start fresh. Sitting at her kitchen table, staring at the bank statement on her laptop, tears welled in her eyes. It wasn't quite happiness, it was a mix of relief and sorrow for everything she'd lost. She looked around the house, which now felt so empty and cold, and realized this life, this house, these walls, everything she had built, no longer reflected who she was. She closed her laptop and picked up her phone, sending a message to Emily. "I think it's time to move." In the days that followed, Madison began putting her plans into action. She listed the house for sale and started searching for smaller apartments. While packing boxes and sorting through old documents, she came across things that made her reflect on her journey. Among the wedding photos with Ryan and the romantic notes he had written years ago, she stumbled upon something that hit her like a wave of unexpected pain. A card he had written on their first wedding anniversary. "You are the love of my life. I can't wait to build our future together." Madison felt a lump in her throat as she read those words, but instead of crying, she took a deep breath. She realized that for a long time, she had idealized Ryan and their love. She believed he was all she needed because in some ways she didn't feel she was enough on her own. But now, after everything he had done, she knew she was enough. She didn't need Ryan or anyone who didn't value her strength, her dedication, or the immense heart she brought to everything she did. She placed the card in a pile of papers to be discarded and continued packing. It was time to leave the past behind. One afternoon, as Madison took a final walk through the park she used to frequent, she found herself watching the people around her. Parents playing with their kids, runners focused on their goals, and couples strolling hand in hand. For a moment she felt out of place, as though she were the only person there trying to piece her life back together. But then something unexpected happened. A little boy fell off his bike near her, and before his parents could react, Madison crouched down to help him. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice gentle, the same tone she used with her patients at the hospital. The boy looked up at her with tear-filled eyes but nodded. "I just fell." "Sometimes falling hurts," she said, helping him to his feet. "But you know what? You get back up again, and you come back stronger. Next time, you won't even remember this fall." The boy smiled, and his parents thanked her as they helped him back onto his bike. Madison watched them walk away, and for the first time in a long while, she felt a small flicker of hope. It was as if that simple interaction had reminded her that, like the boy, she could rise again. And next time maybe she wouldn't even remember the fall. When Madison finally chose an apartment, a small but cozy place in the heart of Charleston, she began to feel lighter. It wasn't just the physical move that mattered, but the symbolism of leaving behind a house full of painful memories. Every box she unpacked felt like a step toward her future, and every piece of furniture she rearranged was an act of reclaiming herself. One evening, Emily came over, bringing wine and pizza to celebrate the new chapter. "So, how does it feel?" Emily asked, sitting on the floor beside her since the couch hadn't arrived yet. "I feel free," Madison replied, smiling softly. "Not completely healed, but like, for the first time in a long time, I'm in control of my life. It's scary, but also empowering." Emily raised her wine glass. "Here's to that. To freedom and the strength of being yourself, Maddie. You're incredible, you know that?" Madison laughed, blushing slightly. "I don't know if I'm incredible, but I do know I'm trying. And for now, I think that's enough." Therapy with Dr. Bennett also became a cornerstone of her journey. In one session, Madison finally articulated something she had been carrying since the start of her struggle. "I've realized that for so long I let other people define my worth, my job, Ryan, society's expectations. But now, I want my worth to come from me. I don't want to live to prove anything to anyone anymore." Dr. Bennett smiled. "That, Madison, is what we call true freedom, and it only comes after a lot of pain and growth. You're on the right path." As her life began to find stability again, Madison received news that surprised her. Ava had broken up with Ryan. According to Emily, who still had some contacts around town, Ava had discovered that Ryan had been lying about his financial situation and could no longer sustain the lifestyle she expected. He was now living in a small apartment, struggling to rebuild his real estate career. Madison thought about it for a moment but felt no joy, just a strange indifference. Ryan and Ava were no longer part of her life, and whatever happened to them didn't matter. She had bigger things to focus on, her own happiness and dreams. One sunny morning, as Madison walked to her job at the hospital, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: peace. She knew the road ahead would still be long, but now she had something she didn't before: confidence in herself. She had survived the worst and come out stronger. As the sun shone brightly over Charleston, Madison smiled to herself. For the first time, it felt like life was truly beginning again. A year had passed since Madison signed the divorce papers. Spring was in full bloom in Charleston, bringing with it a lightness that mirrored her state of mind. The city, with its historic buildings and cobblestone streets, had never looked so beautiful. For the first time in years, Madison no longer felt the weight of the past in every corner, in every memory. The morning began like so many others: the sound of her alarm clock, the aroma of fresh coffee, and sunlight streaming through the curtains of the small apartment she now called home. As she looked around, Madison felt a sense of pride in how she had transformed the space into something that reflected who she was. The walls were decorated with paintings she had created over the past few months, a new passion she had rediscovered, while reconnecting with her creativity. They depicted serene landscapes like fields of flowers and distant mountains, visual representations of the calm she sought for herself. After a quick cup of coffee, she grabbed her backpack and headed out for work. Being a nurse was still a central part of her life, but Madison had learned to find a balance that once seemed impossible. She had reduced her overtime hours, prioritizing her emotional and physical well-being. The hospital remained challenging, but somehow she felt better equipped to handle it. During her break at work, her phone buzzed with a call from Emily. "Maddie, I have to tell you something. Remember that charity project I mentioned?" "Yes, of course," Madison replied, grabbing a bottle of water as she sat on a bench in the hospital garden. "So we've secured funding to open a free health clinic in one of Charleston's most underserved neighborhoods. And well, I was wondering, would you be willing to be the clinic's head nurse? I know it's a big step, but you're the right person for the job." Madison was silent for a moment, absorbing the proposal. Becoming head nurse would mean leaving the comfort of her stable job to embark on something entirely new. But it was also an opportunity to make a real difference in people's lives, something that had always been important to her. "Emily, I'm surprised," Madison finally said. "But I think this is exactly the kind of challenge I need right now. I accept." On the other end of the line, Emily squealed with excitement. "I knew you'd say yes. You have no idea the impact you're going to have, Maddie." As the call ended, Madison felt a rush of emotion. For the first time in a long time, she was choosing something not out of necessity or obligation, but because it made her heart race with excitement. That weekend, Madison visited her parents in Georgia. They were older now, with gray hair and slower movements, but their love and wisdom were as strong as ever. Her mother hugged her tightly the moment she arrived. "You look different, sweetheart. Lighter," her mother said, gently brushing a strand of hair from Madison's face. "I think I'm finally learning how to be happy, Mom," Madison replied with a soft smile. On the porch that evening, as they watched the sunset together, her mother began to speak. "You know, Maddie, life is like a patchwork quilt. Not all the pieces are beautiful, some are torn or stained. But in the end, every piece has a purpose, and together they create something special. What you went through was painful, but I think it's one of those hard pieces that makes your quilt stronger." Her mother's words struck a deep chord. Madison realized that while she would never forget what Ryan had done, she no longer needed to carry that weight as a burden. It was part of her story, but it wasn't the whole story. Back in Charleston, work at the new clinic quickly took shape. The space was small but vibrant, and Madison felt invigorated as she organized supplies, trained the new team, and met the neighborhood residents who would benefit from the services. The people who came to the clinic were grateful, many expressing how much hope the place brought to their lives. One day, as Madison was wrapping up a shift, an older woman took her hand. "You have such a big heart," the woman said, tears in her eyes. "I don't know what we'd do without you here." Madison smiled, deeply moved. "I'm just happy to help. That's what matters." In her personal life, things were changing too. While Madison had sworn she wasn't ready for another relationship, she began to go out more, meeting new people and slowly opening herself up to new possibilities. One person who caught her attention was Daniel, a history professor who frequented the same park where she often ran. He was kind, attentive, and seemed genuinely interested in her without rushing anything. One crisp autumn evening, as they walked through the park together, Daniel stopped and looked into her eyes. "You're incredible, Madison. I don't know what happened in your past, but who you are now is someone very special." His words touched her deeply. For the first time, she felt seen, not for the pain she had endured, but for the strength she had built. Madison knew there would still be hard days. The trauma Ryan had caused wouldn't vanish entirely, but she had found something far more important: the ability to start anew. Not as a broken woman, but as someone who had rebuilt herself with care, resilience, and self-love. That Sunday evening, Madison sat on her balcony with a cup of tea, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance. For the first time in a long time, she felt a profound sense of gratitude. Gratitude for surviving, for finding her strength, and for finally being in control of her own story. Madison smiled to herself and whispered into the wind, "I fell, but I got back up. And this is only the beginning." This was Madison's emotional journey, a story of heartbreak, resilience, and rebuilding. Now I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever gone through something similar? How would you handle a situation like this? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to read and connect with you. And if you enjoyed this story and want to see more inspiring narratives like this one, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss a video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.